I have a Patreon member question from Fahim. And so, folks, if you want to subscribe on Patreon, you can submit questions, guest suggestions, etc. Find that link in the video description. But the question is, and I know you'll like this question, so it might be hard to answer in just a minute or two, but do you think that Putin went over history so extensively because he knows that Americans' versions of history is what happened just an hour ago, and it's important for Americans to understand the historical context? Do you feel like that was an underlying motivation for his focus on history, especially in the beginning?
Well, again, I'm loath to speak on behalf of the Russian president and presume that I know why he did and et cetera. But what I will say is this: is somebody who has studied the Russian president, every word he speaks is important, whether he's swearing or whether he's talking history. He is very careful in what he says, and he understands that words have meaning, and when a president of Russia says words, that people are listening, and he is careful not to put himself in a situation where he overcommits verbally or he understates. Everything is precise. It's done for a reason. And so there's a reason why he did that. And the reasons don't have to be, the thing about Vladimir Putin is he's a man capable of complex thoughts. So the reason doesn't just have to be to throw Tucker Carlson off. I mean, that's a desired outcome, but the substance of the words still matter. And so he was committing to a historic narrative that he wanted not just America, but the world, and to, frankly speaking, the Russian people to hear. He's also speaking to the Russian people. Every time he speaks, he's speaking to the Russian people. He treats them with that kind of respect. And so he's putting forward a narrative saying, this is the vision that I, the leader of the Russian nation, have from a historic standpoint. I'm committing to this narrative, and, people need to be aware of that. So I think also the Russian people, and I probably shouldn't read your chat, but I know you have some Russians in your chat right now, and we'll see if they agree with me or not. But the Russian people know Russian history, so they're able to read into the lesson that Putin is giving. They're going, oh, he's talking about left bank, right bank. He's talking about Ukraine, Russia, new Russia, and all that stuff. And the Russian people are going, okay, we get it. We understand, because, he hasn't been articulating an in-game strategy. I saw that when I was over there. People kept saying, how's it going to end? I said, don't ask me, ask the Russian government. The Russian government's the only one that can articulate, how this thing ends. That's a question that goes to the Russian government. The fact that you don't know the answer means the Russian government hasn't adequately communicated that to you. So I think what Vladimir Putin was doing was laying the foundation for this larger discussion of, how this war will end, what an end game looks like. So I think every word he spoke during this interview with Tucker Carlson carried weight, and I think it was spoken for a reason. Again, you can address different audiences. Like I said, I think he was addressing an American audience. That was addressing a European audience. He's addressing a Russian audience. Every word mattered, and that's hopefully another takeaway that people will have is, you don't have to love Vladimir Putin. You don't have to run around with a Team Putin t-shirt or any of that kind of stuff, but respect the guy. And, respect the fact that he believes in what he's doing, that his belief is founded in fact, and respect, how he defines himself. There's a lot of people out there trying to define Russia. Well, that's fine and dandy. He spoke of the Russian soul. And my challenge to every American listening, everybody in the world, is, why don't you go on a journey of trying to define what the Russian soul is? And if you do that, you might actually begin to understand the Russian perspective. John F. Kennedy gave a speech at American University in June of 1963. It's a famous speech. And one of the things that he said in the speech is that, we're in the Cold War, we had just gone through the Cuban Missile Crisis. And he said, it's imperative. We don't have to embrace what the Soviets are saying. We don't have to agree with what they're doing, but we do have to put ourselves in their shoes so we understand where they're coming from, what their perspective is. We have to respect that. I think Vladimir Putin basically, through this presentation, put down a giant pair of moccasins and said, jump on in, guys. Feel what it's like to be a Russian. Try to understand us. Try to understand our perspective. And anybody who takes the time and effort to do that, I think will be better positioned to understand what the best way forward is for the United States and Russia in terms of resolving the many issues that confront us today.
Yeah, indeed. And I forgot to mention this. I'll just mention it briefly. From earlier, the way and when he was speaking to an American audience, I felt like every time he said something like, "Oh, Tucker, the time you applied for the CIA. Oh, who blew up Nord Stream? You
You
did.
did.
Oh, who what's my response to China being the new colonizer? Oh, that's a boogeyman story. You're hurting yourself." He wasn't saying Tucker Carlson, although I think Tucker Carlson at times, like with the Nord Stream situation, took it like a champ and made good humor out of it. But I think what Putin was doing was saying, no, you, as in Americans, the U.S., making that this connection because, I think we have a situation where many Americans, whether they are doing this intentionally or maybe they're not thinking about it, they do identify with the U.S. government's actions. They don't agree with everything. They certainly don't even pay attention to everything. They don't think everything matters. But at the same time, done in the name of Americans, the United people in the United States. So I thought that was also just brilliant to do, like, you, not the U.S. government, because if you had done that, then you take out then you shift the audience. Then he's talking to the U.S. government, and also and not to mention that is provocative too. That would be considered, a slander, an attack, and then you'd have the mainstream media being able to go, with report after report after report about how Putin spoke like this and made threats. You see it now with the whole NATO Trump comments, right? Trump said this thing about NATO that he's literally been saying like every single day of his political career since the 2016 campaign. But now it's this huge thing because he said it, and he said Russia can do whatever it wants, right? So anything. So they were looking for that, and he didn't give them any ammunition at all. They couldn't even put words in his mouth, but yet he still spoke to Americans. So I thought that was,
Yeah.
I don't know, pretty
I thought
incredible.
one of the underappreciated parts of his presentation too was the lecture he gave us on dollar policy and how America's committing economic suicide with that. I hope that every American listened to that and understand that
Right.
this guy's 100% correct, that we slit our own throat. De-dollarization could not have occurred. I'm just being frank. The power of the dollar was absolute, and de-dollarization would never occurred unless we created the conditions by delegitimizing this American control over the global economy. Why would anybody want to use the dollar as the reserve currency when the United States at any time can seize, say, $300 billion of your
Which they're still
sovereign wealth
talking
fund?
about. They're talking about
Yeah.
now. They're still talking about
So now
continue.
I'm Vietnam, and I've got my money, and I go, wow, wait a minute. So you're telling me that if I ever do anything that the United States Congress isn't happy about, you can just seize my money in your system? I don't like that. Hey, BRICS, you're going to come up with an alternative? Yeah, we think we will. I'm going that way. Here's your dollars back. We don't want them anymore. I mean, and this is what we've done. And Putin, you can see the exasperation in his face because he's sitting there going, "Why are you doing
He's like,
this? This really makes
yeah,
no sense." You know?
right. The eyes, you can see it. It's just like, what sense does this make? It's only going to hurt the United States. And he outlined very clearly, just in terms of Russian trade, Russia-China trade, as just one example, because this is just happening all across the board, whether we're talking about China, UAE, or any other instance, especially amongst global South countries, the BRICS countries, the rising emerging economies in the global south, that they are all making moves toward currency swaps, bilateral trade being transitioned into their national currencies. Like that's the
Things
trend,
that
and
are
you're exactly
things that
right.
are economically inefficient. I mean, they're losing money doing this. The
Right,
dollar was
exactly.
very convenient. And the other thing is, yeah, I just don't understand the United States Senate. I mean, I really don't. But we made so much money off of having the dollar as the convenience to the United States of the dollar being the global currency of choice. It was a tremendous multi-hundred-billion-dollar plus, economic advantage, and we've thrown it away. It's literally like we said, how can we guarantee the collapse of the American economy in the shortest time frame possible? Why don't we do everything we can to get the world to turn their back on the US dollar? And we did it. And so, I mean, this is insane. And the rest of the world, nobody would have said, "I'm willing to take the hit." The cost of currency transactions, the inefficiency of this design, currency swaps, etc. The only reason they're doing that is because the United States has made it impossible for them to continue to be involved with the dollar. The United States Senate, really, if you guys want to do something good for, you know, whatever happens to you in the election, pass a law that says the United States that you're not going to ever sanction people again. Sanctions are stupid. Pass a law that preserves the integrity of the dollar being the global reserve currency of choice. Create a system that protects people who use the dollar, and then and only then we might be able to get some people to say, like in BRICS. I mean, it would be nice if you did that before October, so that people in BRICS going, "Hey, wait a minute, stop! Before we talk about taking this big step of dumping the dollar, America just did something smart. They're making the dollar attractive again. Um, can we get it in writing, America? Can BRICS now turn to America and say, get it in writing? No more denial of SWIFT system, no more, things like that. And if they do that, I think a lot of people, even the Saudis, will say, all right, yeah, we'll go back to the dollar as the petro currency, because we know how that works. We know that it can work. We know how efficient it can be. But they can't do it if America is going to use that. Marco Rubio, who I despise, had a moment of honesty a while back when he was talking about Brazil, and Brazil was talking about de-dollarization. They're talking about doing transactions in other currencies. He said we can't allow this to happen. He said because if Brazil dumps the dollar, then we won't be able to control the Brazilian economy through sanctions. I'm like, that's the whole idea, Marco. And the fact that you want to control the Brazilian economy through sanctions is the greatest reason the Brazilians could ever have to dump the dollar. Whereas if you said, our job isn't to control your economy through sanctions, our job is to ensure that the dollar is a stable currency for global commerce, that's our number one driving economic factor, to keep the dollar as the most stable, viable currency for international commerce. But that's not the goal. We have to control the world. And as a result, we're going to lose the mechanism that gives us that control, the US dollar.
Yeah. Yeah, and it comes out of, I mean, it not only is it a losing venture or losing policy, but it comes out of desperation, because it's obviously coming out of a need to control Brazil's economy. Sure, yes, these are how these people think, and at the same time, the reality is, at least what isn't just abstract, is that this is directed toward very particular countries that the United States wants, obviously, to control, and they can't do it. And so it's gone to the point where they've turned to every, if there's a toolbox, they've opened up the whole tool. They've poured all the tools out, and they said, all right, let's throw the wrench at Russia. And that you don't throw wrenches, that's the thing, is that they're throwing everything they can at countries that are rising, that they can't control, and it's backfiring big time, because this was never going to end well if it means that you have to sacrifice economic stability or even economic influence for that very goal, because the very goal of controlling a country like Russia, China, getting them to uh, fall, destabilize them, weaken them, that's exactly what you're trying to do. So it's an interesting dynamic that I think is going to continue to play out on the world stage for some time to come. And I'm glad, Scott, that you are willing to spend your time with me to go over these things.
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyHaiFong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.